The Pigeon House Road takes its name from John Pidgeon, who was employed by the old Dublin Ballast Board in the 18th century. The original Pigeon House was a blockhouse which was built in 1760, and John Pidgeon was appointed its caretaker in 1761. As shipping traffic moored at the blockhouse, Mr. Pidgeon and his wife soon established a trade providing passengers with refreshments, and subsequently became known as Pigeon's House. The D was later dropped from the name. This service coincided with the family providing transport to day trippers by rowing them to the blockhouse, many of them from Ringsend, for food and drink, and return them to the village afterwards. Pigeon's House soon became one of the most popular restaurants in Dublin, as visitors sailed from Dunleary and Howth to view the considerable interest in the south wall and admire its pioneering work, most trips taking place on weekends, particularly Sundays. However, on occasions some luckless emigrants headed for England were apprehended and forced into service with the Royal Navy. There was also a fair share of coach jackings from Dublin City and smugglers trying to sail into Dublin Bay under the cover of darkness. One evening in 1786, 4 men arrived at Pigeon's House claiming to be in distress. Once they gained entry, they attacked Mr. Pidgeon and his wife. His son Ned and daughters Mary and Rachel came running from upstairs to help defend their parents. During the attack, Ned's arm was slashed by a sword and he subsequently lost the use of it. The thieves took all of the family's possessions and in the course of their escape damaged the family boat. The pigeons were so popular that soon as word spread of the attack, locals began a collection to reimburse their losses and a new boat was organised for the family. Within a few days, Ned and his father were out in their new boat fishing. Ned could only steer on account of his injuries. Mr. Pidgeon hooked a heavy object and having to draw his line in to release it, he discovered it to be a corpse. He recognised the body to be one of the assailants. Soon after, a second body was washed ashore and identified as another of the assailants. John Pidgeon passed away that winter in 1786. Following his father's death, Ned hired 2 men to row the pleasure boat whereby Ned would steer due to his injuries and collect the fares. One day Ned noticed a knife which one of the hired men had and immediately recognised it as his father's. He confronted the hired rower, accusing him of being one of those thieves who terrorised his parents, which ultimately led to his father's passing. The culprit tried to flee but was captured and arrested and admitted that he stabbed his 3 accomplices over the division of the loot they stole from Pigeon's house. He was found guilty and hanged. Ned Pidgeon died soon after from his injuries, possibly from a septic infection. Mrs. Pidgeon also passed away, and so it was that the daughters Mary and Rachel were left to fend for themselves. They continued the Pigeon House tradition and even rowed guests up and down the river. One evening, following a shipwreck near Ringsend, the sisters took part in the rescue. As well as the captain of the stricken ship, they managed to save a wealthy widower and his young son who were from America. The sisters cared for their new guests in their home and nursed them back to health. The wealthy widower fell in love and married Mary, and they married in Dublin and then left for a new life in America. It would appear that Rachel soon followed and also married. Neither sister ever returned to Ringsend. After the end of the Pigeon era, the Ballast Office made plans in 1787 for the enlargement and refurbishment of the blockhouse. Rooms were reserved for the board and staff. Partick O'Brien and his wife became their housekeepers, continuing the tradition of Pigeon's House. In and around 1793, the Pigeon House Hotel was contracted and completed in 1795 to cater for the growing number of passengers at the Great South Wall, and was run by Mrs. Tunstall, the wife of Francis Tunstall, the Inspector of Works. And that's how Pigeon House Road got its name.